Hello everyone, Jayma Malme here. Today we're creating a single page Easter layout and I'm going to fit 4 photos on this single page. Do you guys ever have those photos where the colors are all over the place, you don't have the right pattern paper to go with it, they're not really the greatest photos, you know what I mean, right? That is what these photos were. So these are from Easter a couple of years ago, and they're cute photos. I want to document the Easter hunt. I didn't take very many photos this Easter, but the colors are so bright. I didn't have a paper, like a pattern paper to go with them, so I just been putting off scrapbooking them. But this month, the creative design team is challenging ourselves to use only cardstock. So that is what I'm going to do, and wait till you see the color palette I've chosen. So check this out. I pulled all of these cardstock colors from my scrap bin. I'm just using scraps today. I'm going to give you some ideas for just using scraps. And they match all the colors in my photos, but look at how pretty they look together. I just, I didn't pull in like the browns and the black. I focused more on the bright colors and then the navy. And so that's what I'm going to draw out, and I'm going to use a white background. I often do use a white background because when you're using a lot of colors, it helps to kind of like tame those bright colors and not make it too overwhelming. So we've got the white background, and I'm going to be doing a really cool technique that I learned from Laura Beecham, who is a fellow Close to My Heart maker in Australia. So let me show you the card I made. I was playing around with the technique already. How cool is this? But you don't have to glue each one of these little squares down individually. I'm going to show you how it's done faster. But isn't that color combo so cute? I made another card with some leftover pieces that I had of this, and so I'll show you that at the end. It is a graduation card, so if you need one of those coming up, it's going to be a great idea for you. Okay, so to do this technique, you just need cardstock scraps. You really hardly need anything. So what I've done is I've already cut my paper down to 1/2 inch by 3 inches. You can do them all different sizes of squares. So I'm going to link Laura's video down in my description below. If you go below the video and click see more, you'll see the full description of everything that I have under the video, supplies, links to that video, and a whole bunch of other stuff like my social media channels you can follow. So I will have her video down below because she goes into great detail, giving lots of inspiration and just really, really cute card ideas. So I've already done this, and I'm going to show you what we do to that. And actually, I ended up pulling in a little bit of white glitter paper too, because I thought that it just needed a little bit of kind of another neutral, I guess you could say. And I really only had very small scraps of this white glitter paper left. Like literally, this is all I had left after I had cut straight lines. So really, you don't need much. Now I'm going to be adding some Cricut cuts too, and so I'll go into a little Cricut tutorial after we put together these little pieces, and then we'll put our layout together. So I've got some acetate here. It is 3 inches wide by 12 inches long. This is from Close to My Heart, but you can use any acetate that you have. I like that this is a 12-inch length, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a 12-inch length. But this is the dimensions that Laura gave. They work out really well. They are tried and true because she's tested it. And so the 3-inch width by 12-inch will create pretty much a full card front, and then it's going to create the base of our page down here of our layout. So what we're first going to do is just randomly put these little strips going across the acetate. So I'm just going to take my tape runner here. Now I've got some cardstock in here that has a full UV coating from a previous sale. These ones have little patterns on them, and then I have also mixed in just some regular cardstock. I'm using raspberry, but I'm using the light side of the raspberry because that matched my photos a little better. It matches that. This is a little bit too dark. So Close to My Heart's cardstock is two-toned. It's the full raspberry on one side, and then the back side of every sheet of cardstock is a lighter shade of that same color. So I'm using the back side of raspberry, and all of the cardstock is on sale this month. So if you are in need of any cardstock, then go check that out. There are color family packs. There's a pack of every single one of Close to My Heart's colors. I think there's 7 each of the colors. There's some really great deals. So go check those out. I will link that in the description below. But basically, we are just going to adhere and make sure that you get all the way to the edge, because we're going to be cutting this up to make it look like those little squares. And so you want to make sure that you've got adhesive all the way to the edge. Let's see, I don't want to get my head in the way. That's not totally perfect, but that's going to be okay. So we're just going to do this to every single one, and you don't have to have a special, like a certain pattern. It's not going to matter in the final result. You don't want to have 2 next to each other, but it doesn't have to be like a certain, repeating pattern. So I'm just eyeballing it. That's not, perfectly straight, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and this is what it looks like when we are all done. Doesn't that color just look so pretty? I love this color palette so much. I've got a few strips left over, which we'll see if we need those. And I'm thinking that this is gonna go across the bottom, and then up here we'll do, like some Cricut flowers or Easter title, stuff like that. This would be really pretty just like this, but we are gonna make it look like that mosaic title, and I'm so excited because I've been dying to try this ever since I saw it. So notice one of my glitter pieces didn't even go all the way across. That's okay. We can kind of fill in as needed. So I've got my paper trimmer, and I did test this because I wasn't sure the best way to cut this. Since I have glitter paper, I don't like to use my regular trimmer. So make sure you've got a blade in that you use for glitter paper that may, because it can dull your blade. I did try cutting this upside down, but I didn't like the way that it kind of, like, see how you can see the color on the edges of my cardstock, kind of, because it was cut from the back, so it's kind of ruffled and looks a little bit torn and messy. So I'm going to make sure that I cut it from the top, and we want the width of these, we're going to cut them in strips the same width as these strips. So if you were doing 1/4 inch strips, you would cut this to 1/4 inch. I did 1/2 inch strips, so I'm going to cut it to 1/2 inch. So I'm going to make sure that I'm holding this down really well, because it is harder to cut through the cardstock plus acetate. I want to make sure it's held in place so it doesn't shift. And we will just go all the way down. So now you can see those little squares, and it looks like they're floating because they're on the acetate. So we're going to go ahead and do that to this whole piece. Well, I didn't do something right. I don't know what I did, but these last 2 pieces, I think I cut these like slightly bigger than 1/2 inch, and then this one was not quite big enough. This one is barely big enough. I don't know what I did, but I've got 5 strips. You should come out with 6. So I can go in and do a smaller piece at the end if I need to, but we'll see how far we get with this. All right, so I've cut a piece of 3 by 12 white paper because it's going to go on my white background. So I wanted this to have a white background, and it's going to look like it is floating because that acetate raises it up a little bit, and then you'll see that white background behind there. And people are going to think that you have glued down every single one of these little pieces. So I'm gluing them down at the diagonal because that's what Laura showed, and I thought it was just a really fun look. It's more interesting than just putting them on straight, but you wouldn't have as much waste if you put them on square if you wanted to do that. And I'm putting the adhesive just behind each of the cardstock squares so that it doesn't show through the acetate. So it does take a little bit of extra time to do that, but it's definitely not as much time as if you were to glue down each of those squares individually. So I'm staggering them so this next row has the square in between the 2 squares before it. So each row will be a little bit staggered, and then I'll just go and add adhesive behind more squares. I ended up finding it easier as I got going to just put the adhesive behind every square and then put down when I needed to trim it off, and then the rest of the squares on that strip had adhesive on it already. So it does go pretty quickly, and it was kind of fun to do. It's fun to see the pattern forming. You can do this with patterned paper. This is a great use for your pattern paper scraps or your zip strips that come on your pattern paper sheets from Close to My Heart. So make sure you save all those scraps so you can try this. So this is how far I got before I had to add another row, and that's because that sixth strip that I cut wasn't wide enough. So if you didn't goof like I did, I still don't know how I did that, but you would have enough to cover this whole panel. So I pieced a few things together, and then I created another strip that was 3 inches by, I think, how many is this? 6 strips that I did, and that was more than enough that I needed to finish this up. So I hope that you try this. It was super fun. It makes some great card backgrounds, and as you can see, it also makes a great scrapbook embellishment. It's a great use instead of patterned paper. So this is basically you're creating your own patterned paper. And so it just creates a really, really fun look with custom colors to match your photos, just like I did. So I've got my custom strip across the bottom, and I'm going to arrange my photos how I think I want them. I've already got them matted in a white mat. I cut them down by 1/4 inch and matted them onto some photo placeholders that I had in 4x6 and 3x4. I often add a second mat, but I didn't want to in this case because I'm already fitting so many photos on just one page. So to make my photos pop a little bit more, I'm just rubbing my Sapphire ink pad around the edges to help them pop. Now let's hop over to Cricut Design Space. I've already got some Easter eggs and a cloud just in case, but I ended up not using it. I'm going to go to Images and Uploaded because I know I have this layout from the Life's a Hoot collection. This is a digital art collection that Close to My Heart offered to match the Life's a Hoot paper suite, and they do this for every one of their paper collections. So there are digital art files to go with all of Close to My Heart's current paper collections, and they remain available. So even after the collection is sold out or retired, the digital art is still available. And as you saw, the layout comes in as one file. So there are individual elements available with the collection, like there were some standalone owls and some other standalone items. But if you want to just create a layout that's already done for you, then this is a super handy option because you can just pull the whole layout onto your mat and then go ahead and cut it. You would have to hide the 12x12 pages behind. They are for reference only because obviously your Cricut's not going to cut a 12x12 paper. So you'll just hide that, but otherwise it's ready to cut, and then you can assemble. But what I'm doing here is I started with the layout and I'm customizing it. So I'm changing the colors, I'm moving things around, and I'm isolating some elements. So if you wanted to cut just the flowers, which is kind of what I'm going to do, I'm just going to end up cutting the flowers and the Easter eggs, then you can do that. But I'm taking it a step further and designing my layout in Cricut Design Space first before I cut it. That way I'm cutting just the flowers that I need. I do end up cutting a couple of extra just because while I'm cutting, I might as well because I use flowers a lot. But this is a great way to see how your layout is going to work and play around with the placement before you actually, play around with it on the table. So it's just a different way of doing it. This is a kind of a way of creating a sketch. And actually this is how I create my sketches, is in Cricut Design Space. So I'm going to end up changing all of the colors of the flowers. So that's one thing about these SVG collections is the colors that you see are there to match the paper collection that they went with, but don't let that stop you from using them for other things. So I knew that on my Easter layout I wanted to have a bunch of flowers, and I knew that there were a bunch of flowers already arranged for me on this Life's a Hoot layout. I just needed to change the colors. So check out the SVG collections if you haven't already. They're all on my Close to My Heart website, which is linked down below. And so you can look at the icons and the shapes and see how you might be able to use them, and try to look past the colors and think of what colors you might be able to use them in, because you can change all of the colors. If you don't have a Cricut, you can still use the software because it's free to use, and still kind of lay out your design before you go to create, and you can use die cuts that you might have instead of the Cricut cuts. At this point, I was thinking that I wanted to have those in the white glitter paper, and so the light gray was telling me to cut them in white glitter paper, but then I realized I didn't have enough white glitter paper, and so I ended up cutting a few leaves with some dies that I will show you as we get putting this layout together on my desk. So now you see I've deleted that right hand page because I don't need that. I was thinking I might just want to pull some of those flowers over, but I don't need to. I can duplicate anything I need to from this page, but I think I'm pretty good now with flowers. So I'm going through and changing all the colors. One of the easier ways to do that is the color sync. So you can see on the right hand panel, instead of the layers panel, I'm on color sync, and then I can just drag the colors to the appropriate color. It was a little bit tricky here because I had so many pieces, so I had to sort of hide things and drag them way down, but this way I knew that all the yellows were going to be dragged to the bright yellow. I'm going to drag all the purples to the hot pink eventually, and the orange. And so that can be a faster way than going to layers panel and clicking on each individual item and then going in and choosing the color. You can certainly do it that way. In Cricut, I swear there's like 100 ways to do one thing for so many things. So, this is just the way that I do it, and I kind of work on things quickly. And I know that I've got this sped up, and it's, I'm not explaining everything, but it would have taken all day. This is already a pretty long video to explain everything. So I'm working on my title now. I just want it to say Easter, and I'm going through several of my fonts. My go-to font is usually Autumn in November, which is one that I downloaded from dafont.com. But I had some other script fonts that are pretty that I wanted to try that I had uploaded as well. Most of them are from dafont.com, so that's a great place to go and check out different fonts and download them to your system. But I ended up going with the Autumn in November font anyway, and I just stretched it a tiny bit because I wanted it to be wider than it was, but I didn't want to make it look disfigured. So I just stretched it out a tiny bit, and I added an offset so that it would stand out off my page. Now I deleted or hid everything I don't need, made sure that I only have the colors that I want before sending it to my mat. Now I wanted to show you this process because I hope it will help some of you. There are a lot of different mats here, and I have more mat space than I need. So what I'm doing is going to some of my mats. So I've got the Sapphire here, and I'm moving those items that I want to be in Sapphire over to this white mat. And then what I'll do is I'll just put the white paper at the top of the mat and the Sapphire paper at the bottom of the mat. And here is a look at how that looks, so that I can have just one mat go through for 2, or you can do more colors at a time. So hopefully that helps you out. Okay, now we're back here at my desk, and I started laying things out and realized that I wanted to ink around the edges of my flowers just to give them a little bit more dimension. Now that is a little piece of Tim Holtz Media Mat. It comes as a bigger mat, and then you can cut it into small pieces so that they are sized for your different ink pads so they don't slide around on your desk when you're doing ink blending. I'm really liking it. That little square that I showed you is cut to fit under a Distress Oxide ink pad. I still need to cut one to the size of my CTMH ink pads, but I'm really liking it. Now here was an egg where I glued all those little pieces on and they didn't line up quite right. So I'm just showing you to save those pieces, the negative pieces that come off of your Cricut mat, to help you line things up if you ever come across something like this with the Easter eggs. All right, I've got two of my favorite background stamp sets here, the Perfectly Imperfect Patterns and Background Elements. And I'm gonna go with the Perfectly Perfect Patterns because I wanted to stamp just a little bit of detail onto some of the flowers. I decided just to do this on the pink flowers, and it's a very subtle effect, but I think it just adds a little bit of something extra. I love the detail. You can add it to more of the flowers if you want. I just didn't want to get too carried away with too much pattern because I've already got a lot going on this page. I'm doing second generation so that it's not too dark since I'm using the light side of the raspberry paper. So I'm stamping it off on the scrap paper and then onto my flower. The first one didn't get very dark at all, so I stamped it again, but the next two were just perfect. And then I wanted to shape my flowers a little bit, so I'm just rubbing my thumb over all of the flowers. I did this to every single one, even these kind of more flat ones, just to give it a little bit of body, just that extra little bit of something, and it really helps to make a statement on this layout. Now for the arranging and embellishing. Now I have the Cricut layout up on my computer screen next to me, so I'm referencing that as I do this, and I'm just putting those Easter eggs exactly how I had them on the layout. Now it looks a little bit different once you add your photos because you've got additional colors on your layout. So originally I had that orange Easter egg over on the left-hand side of the page on Cricut Design Space, but my son is wearing an orange shirt and it would have been so much orange over there on the left, so I just made a few little alterations once I actually started putting the layout together. I ended up not cutting the leaves that I had in Cricut because I remembered that I had all of these little die cut pieces. Those are UV coated die cut sheets that are available as part of the Cardstock Carnival sale that Close to My Heart is having this month. They're available individually in each of those colors, or as a pack you can get all of the different colors, and they've got this shiny UV coating, so I thought it was just a fun little added element to put on this page, add a little bit of shine and just a little bit different shape of flowers as well. So there are a few different flowers. Each of the die cut sheets has all the same die cuts, they're just in different colors. So I used a few different colors, the ones that went with my layout. There's the orange and the Lagoon, and then the green leaves. And I still have plenty left for future projects. There are lots of little usable shapes, so I'm sure that these are going to last quite some time. Now on to these white glitter paper leaves that I mentioned earlier. So these leaves here come from the Layered Flowers die set, and this particular die has 4 leaves on it. But I mentioned I only had little scraps of my white glitter paper, so I strategically placed my glitter cardstock so that I would cut like 1 leaf at a time, because I can just use those little single leaves and add them to the clusters. So I really like how that turned out. I decided I needed to have a little bit of splatter because the top right area was a little bit blank for me, so I wanted to add just a little bit of something up there. So I got out my Sapphire blue shimmer brush, and this is going to add a little bit of sapphire splatter as well as shimmer. And it's really hard to catch on video, but the shimmer is just lovely. If you are not into splatter like that, then that Perfectly Imperfect Patterns stamp that I used earlier has some splatter stamps on it to give you a more controlled splatter look. Now I found this stamp in my stash. It is called Bunny Trail and it is long retired, but I just thought it was so perfect. It says the hunt is on, and I really debated if I was going to use it because I didn't want this layout to get even more busy than it already is, but I just had to because it's perfect. So I sort of rearranged the title and that photo so that I could put it right there above my photo. I forgot to add my little foam piece underneath there, so I made sure that I held it down for a little while so it had time to soak in. And there we go. There is the finished layout. let's take a close-up look at how all of this turned out. Oh my gosh, I love those little squares. I added a few little silver glitter gems around the page, and I love, love, love how this turned out. So let's take a look at that graduation card that I mentioned. I had a little piece of that mosaic paper left over, so I created this card, and this uses 2 stamps that are from the new catalog. I used one of them on the inside, and this would be great for birthday as well, those little birthday balloons. For still shots of all the projects I shared, be sure you follow me over on Instagram and Facebook. I've got my social media links down below. And be sure to check out the rest of the creative design team's videos. There are so many inspiring projects. That playlist is on the right, and another video I think you might enjoy is on the left. Thanks for watching and have a great day.